Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 288, a personal favorite number of mine. I'm not going to say for why, but
Why would you?
288 in the seemingly endless saga of the Hazmat guys. I'm Bobby Salvesen, and I'm here with Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Bob. How's it going?
Very good. And if you don't know this, in addition to doing our podcast in an auditory format, we are also doing videotory types.
It's, I feel required to now wave at the camera,
Yes, we
and
have to.
I guess my shirt should be buttoned, so I'm not showing cleavage.
Why not? It's all right. It's a family-friendly
Yes.
show.
So
Yeah, you
what's
can check us out on YouTube.
we don't edit the video,
No, and there's no ads.
and there's no ads. There's nothing. It's just straight us yapping,
Yep,
and even the stuff that doesn't make the cut, even the stuff where we sound stupid and have to correct each other,
yep,
it's all in here.
yeah,
If
yeah.
you can't get enough of our beautiful voices and you want our beautiful mugs, no, it's good. It's actually good. There is some content that does not make the podcast itself, just because you know we'll
It's so
talk about
stupid.
something. Yeah, well, we'll talk about something real quick, right? And then we'll have like a sidebar, right? It will be like Bob will be like, pause the show for a
Yeah,
second,
yeah,
and then we pause, and then we talk about it, and then it's like, okay, all right, let's go in this direction.
right.
So you get a little bit of that like sidebar, that banter back and forth, where we're kind of, not exactly on the same page and not sure what direction we want the show to go. So it's just some behind the scenes stuff, makes it fun.
Yeah, and plus we're also going to be able to show you things in like a whiteboard capacity if there's concepts or things that we have to kind of
Oh,
bring up.
show
That's a.
show your whiteboard.
I can't.
This
I
is
can't. I didn't set
Oh,
up
you're
for it.
not set up for it? Oh my god,
No.
this is the coolest whiteboard ever. All right, next
Yeah.
show. Next show you got to be ready for it.
Yeah, we have been working tirelessly, and maybe this is the episode next week. Mike brought this up, but we didn't do it. But is we during COVID we worked tirelessly to get the university and stuff off the ground, but we also strive to make a truly cool and dynamic Zoom type thing. So if we had to do it distantly, we could do all types of things that were visually appealing, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. I think we scratched the itch.
There's definitely a bit of an itch scratch today, so I'll let you in. We did a remote training today. Well, it was half remote. Bob did it remote. He was in the what is
The control room.
the control room is basically what we're calling it, which it really was a
Yeah.
control room. Like he's literally sitting in a homemade control room, and he was doing a lecture, and he was like, "Yeah, well, you connect the bed." And he's like, "Hold on a second," pushes his button, and his whiteboard comes up, and now he's drawing on the whiteboard. It was incredible. I was like, I texted him right away, and I was
That's
like,
awesome.
freaking awesome.
Yeah.
So
Next
it's
one we'll do it. I
yeah,
promise.
it flows. We're learning the online teaching, and there's stuff that you do in the classroom that doesn't translate to
Yes.
online, and so it's just we're doing different
Yeah.
stuff. So
So the topic for today, it was something that we were mentioning in class, and I think it bears some expansion because it's a concept. Uh, it's almost so common sense that you don't appreciate it enough, and that's the correlation between surface area and vapor production
right,
in its
because
simplest form.
we think of, we teach vapor pressure really poorly, um, and I don't mean that in like a,
Not us. We're
oh,
incredible.
yeah, no, we're phenomenal. I
And
just mean even if you read the books and stuff like that, like we talk about vapor pressure with this number, and this is how much it evaporates.
Mhm.
And then we say, and if you want to compare it to water, which is this, and acetone, which is this, and gasoline, which is this. And if you're a hazmat instructor, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you're shaking your head, and you're like, yeah, okay, well, why is that? Why is that so bad? And it's because it doesn't give full context to vapor pressure, right? It 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 doesn't it doesn't really give you like how much vapors are coming, how much vapor is coming into the air. How can I relate that to a parts per million? How can I relate what's coming off of the surface of a product versus the size of a room. Well, how do we talk about the area? Like there's so much that goes into vapor pressure, mainly because the product is in liquid form, and then from liquid form it becomes a vapor. And we always say when it's in the air, it's in our lungs. But what exactly does that mean? Like clearly common sense tells us that a tiny little cup is going to push off way less vapors than if I spread it around the room on the floor, but we never really talk about it.
So one of the things that kind of brought it back around to me, I'm going to say a while back, cars used to have clearance. Like you used to be able to get really high, kind of under a car without the car needing a jack and stuff. And where I'm going with this is that the newer cars, the kids have these hoopties that are dropped down to the ground, and they're like an inch and a half off the ground.
You break your wrist trying to get under there.
Yeah. So with that, when it starts leaking gas because it's picking up every nail into the tank, one of the things that we see is that um, we had to put the pop-up pool underneath. So we used to be able to take a spackle bucket and kind of cut it down with a sawzall and just kind of slide it under there. And you can think about the spackle bucket's what, like a foot diameter or whatever it might be. If that bucket held 2 gallons and it was 12 inches wide, you could do the math on the depth. If I wanted to do 2 gallons and I have 2 inches of height, then that ring has to get exponentially wider
Right.
for me to take the same volume. And this is where it comes down to that evaporation, which, for the sake of our argument here in hazmat, would be, I would say, the same wording as vapor production,
Yeah,
right?
I would say we try to link the two by talking about vapor pressure and then
Right.
saying this is how fast something evaporates.
Right. And in true chemistry science, evaporation is not the same thing as vapor production, but for the sake of our argument, it is. So when you have a pool that is wider, you produce more vapor, which means that I make more flammable vapors, let's say, or toxic vapors, or whatever the hell it might be. And therefore, it is much, much easier for me to get into the flammable range than with something that's narrow.
Especially when we're under a car.
Yeah.
Because we're under a car, and if you think back to the bucket and you got this little space and it's giving off vapors, the vapors have in the middle have an easier time getting to fresh air, right? And so they go out of the LEL a lot quicker. We start making that pool wider, and you think, I mean, what is our narrow little pop-up pool? What is that, like 6 inches high? What would you say that's 4 feet wide when that thing's fully popped
Yeah,
up?
probably 3 to 4 feet.
Now imagine the vapors in the middle that is at a high concentration now having to leave that area. Like you almost get a larger plume underneath the car that essentially widens your flammable range. Yeah, and I don't mean widens the flammable range like, all right, gasoline is 1.6 to 3, whatever. I literally mean like the physical distance of where a spark could occur that could generate an explosion.
Yes. Yes. And I think of flammability um in like the strict terms of like a function. It's a geographical location
Right.
where there is actually feet or inches that are in an arc around that pool. So the pool is like right in the middle. And for those of you that are not watching, by all means, you can go to the YouTube and check out what I'm doing. There is like a dome that's above that, where inside that dome it's too rich, and then there's another dome that is the line of too lean. Right? It's almost like you can think of this as like a hot, warm, and cold zone, but the warm zone is our flammable range.
Well, if you really go light a candle,
Yes.
right? If you go light a candle and you look at the flame on the candle, really look at it. Go from below the candle and look up into the candle, and you will see that there is essentially an area between the wick and the flame front where there's nothing happening. There's no burning, and then there's the burning, and then there's nothing again. And that dome shape where the fire is really a dome, and that is your perfect visual example of the explosive area.
Right.
The area where you have enough mixture of fuel and oxygen that you produce a fire.
Right. Exactly. And that ratio. So all right, I think I got to go into fire point and flash point because this is how I kind of all put this together in my head. Is that if you think about the difference between a flash point and a fire point, and then you can go way frick higher for auto ignition points. But the flash point is like where the fire just flashes on, it's gone. It's like when you take a film flash and it's pop and it's gone. So what happened there is that there was enough vapor to ignite with me putting the lighter in there, right? But it didn't have enough vapor pressure in order to replenish the fuel in air for it to kick the cycle over one more time,
Right.
right? So the only thing I can do, because I can't really, influence the environment as far as pressure. I can't pressurize a room and vacuum the room out. I can influence it by raising the temperature. So I dial this thing up 5-6 degrees, right? And now I get more vapor production. And with that, when I put my lighter in there, that vapor flashes. The heat that's made radiates back into the container, producing more vapors, and the cycle kicks over.
Right.
Now, if I take my pool and I widen it out, I'm naturally creating more vapor, meaning that it's probably going to get easier to get the thing to cycle over.
Especially in a confined area.
Yes.
Right. So you have to remember that whenever we talk, and this is probably one of the problems in talking about vapor pressure to begin with, is that we don't give you all the variables right off the bat. So, what you do in a room that's 10 by 10, you could get that room to flash. You may not be able to get a flash outside because the vapors are building up now in the room. And with something with a low vapor pressure or where it's just at its flash point, right? You could flash that room, and then now you got to close the door and wait 10 minutes for the vapors to build back up again. Flash the room again.
Yes.
Heat it up a little bit more, like maybe just a couple more degrees, and you still have to wait for the vapors to build to flash it, but now it takes 5 minutes. And then heat it up again, and now it takes 2 minutes, and then 1 minute. The vapors can replace themselves in 1 minute
Yes.
until you get to a temperature in which you basically no longer have to wait for the vapors to replenish themselves. It's happening so quickly that the burning just keeps on going.
Right. And this is like for those of us that have been in the fire service a long time, there used to be the fire triangle. And then they replaced it to the fire tetrahedron. And what they did was they added the fourth component is the chemical reaction, which is exactly what we just described, is that feedback loop that just perpetuates forward. If we didn't have that temperature, if we didn't have the heat, then we could not get the chemical reaction to keep going. That's kind of like the key production there. Fire, they just keep it stupid. Break the rocks, run into the buildings. We're understanding the science behind the why.
Right. This is, when you have a three-dimensional fire, in a
Mhm.
like a liquid B, a liquid B. Sorry, I'm a little shot right now. I'll let you know we're like I've been up for almost 24 hours at this point. Uh, so if you have a pool of flammable liquid and you have a three-dimensional fire in that liquid, right? You have structure, you have something metal burning in there with it. You go to apply foam, or you go to apply powdered agent like a purple K, or right. You break that chemical reaction, the flame goes out, but the heat from the metal is already at the auto ignition temperature, producing so much vapor and giving energy that it reacts with the oxygen. It just kicks right over again.
Right. So getting kind of back to, I know we kind of went on a tangent with that, but getting back to evaporation, a couple of things have to be understood. First off, evaporation does not, nobody cares about how deep it is. Evaporation is a surface phenomenon. right? It,
Right.
it it only happens to the top. So when we're doing even like foam calculations, I don't care it's 60 feet deep. I care about how much surface area it has because that is the vapor production. And this kind of goes to, and I don't remember if I mentioned on the show because we do so much freaking teaching and I use all these things over and over. I really should freshen up my act. um, I usually ask everybody in the class how many people have pools, and there's eventually going to be one or two people that pick up their hands, and you say, okay, so do you have a solar cover? And if you're from the Northeast, you do. If you're from California, you've never even heard of a solar cover because it's like the sun out there. But so the way they market these things is that this solar cover, when you apply it to the top of the pool, you will warm the pool. So I asked somebody, what's the theory? Explain how it warms the pool. And you usually get a couple of scratching of the heads and etc. And the way this thing works is that it looks like a big sheet of just bubble wrap, right? It's a little bit heavier duty. They always come up with like, okay, the sun heats the air in that little pocket, and then it's transmitted into the water. And I'm like, that is a great theory. It's completely wrong. The reason how that thing works and the marketing is misleading is it's not actually warming the pool. The bubbles hold the plastic on the top of the pool so it doesn't sink under. But the key component is they're putting a plastic skin on the top of the pool, preventing evaporation and therefore stopping the cooling process. This is how sweating works. When you sweat, you evaporate that liquid, the sweat, and therefore it is a cooling process. And so if I stop my pool from evaporating, I'm preventing it from cooling.
Yep.
It looks like I'm heating it. I'm not heating it. I'm keeping it from cooling.
And in the exact reverse aspect, if I've got a pot on the stove, right? I got two
Yes.
pots on the stove, and I take and I cover one pot. The pot that I cover is going to end up boiling faster because I am not allowing evaporation to take place at a rapid rate. So if both of them have the same equal heat on it
Yep.
and they're both evaporating, or one is evaporating more than the other, the one that's evaporating more is also now auto refrigerating or cooling more. So it's going to take longer for that to heat up because it's constantly heating up from the bottom and cooling on the top, heating at the bottom, cooling on the top. Slap a cover on it. I reduce that vaporization, I reduce the cooling, and my pot boils faster.
So utilizing like these techniques, I think is next level stuff. And we have a couple different techniques to do for those pools. Like you can throw, and we don't do this, but I'm just throwing out hyperbole, if you would, on this stuff, is that if you threw a foam blanket across it, you would do the same thing as putting a plastic skin. If you put a cover on it, if you think about this, like all the high vapor stuff, the bottles that we buy that have the higher vapor pressure, notice how all the necks are narrow.
Acetone, alcohols, your toluenes,
Yeah. And pails of paint,
pails of paint,
no vapor pressure, and so therefore it's a wide
big
open jug.
wide open jug. Yep.
So what we're saying here is consider these things when you're making your next transfer, because the vessel you have it in, even if it's just a sheen of gasoline on it, all the way up to a couple of inches, you are producing roughly the same amount of vapor. It doesn't matter how much gasoline is in there. So the key to this whole thing is keep it as thin as possible, keep it as closed as possible as far as your surface area, and you're going to produce the least amount of vapors, which will keep you safer in the long run.